Welcome, friend. I'm James, your host, and today, we're diving into another captivating episode. Grab a drink, get comfortable, and get ready for a powerful story that's sure to resonate. If something hits home, share your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive in. TIFU by jumping into a lake in my bra and panties to save a man who turned out to be an elite military scuba diver in training. So, here's the thing, I never set out to become the laughingstock of an entire military training session, but somehow, that's exactly what happened. It all went down in Los Angeles, early one foggy morning, when I was just trying to catch a break from the chaos that my life had become. I've been crashing at my sister's place for a few weeks now. Well, more like living on her lumpy futon in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. I'm trying to save up for college by working at her boyfriend's lakeside bar, which is about as glamorous as it sounds. Think late nights, rowdy customers, and endless doom-scrolling during downtime. It's exhausting, but hey, free rent is free rent. The lake itself is gorgeous, a deep, mysterious body of water right on the outskirts of the city, with a thick blanket of fog that rolls over the surface every morning. There's an eerie kind of beauty to it, especially when the mist clings to the water like some ethereal shroud, making it feel like you're stepping into another world. Divers flock to this place because, rumor has it, there's an entire sunken town at the bottom. I've always found that little tidbit fascinating. It adds a layer of mystery to the lake, like it has a secret history it's keeping hidden beneath the surface. For me, though, the lake had become more than just a beautiful spot. It was an escape from my never-ending stress. I'd started taking morning runs along the shoreline, using the time to clear my head and steal a few moments of peace. It had been a particularly rough week, late shifts at the bar, my sister and her boyfriend bickering over God knows what, and that creeping feeling of inadequacy that's been hanging over me like a storm cloud. I needed a break, and the morning run was my ritualistic way of pressing the reset button on life. The air was crisp that day, with a cool bite that helped shake off the remnants of sleep. The trail was deserted, just how I liked it. The fog hung low over the water, creating this hazy, dreamlike atmosphere that made everything feel like it was moving in slow motion. It was almost too quiet, no birds chirping, no rustling leaves, just the faint lap of the water against the rocks. It was as if the whole world had hit pause, and for a few fleeting moments, it felt like I was the only person left alive. That illusion shattered the second I saw him. Or rather, I saw it, a dark mass floating in the water about 40 feet from the shore, motionless and unnervingly still. It was a man, lying face up on the surface, limbs slack, eyes closed, his body drifting ever so slightly with the gentle current. There was an almost unnatural stillness to him, like he was just suspended there, neither alive nor dead. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, and my pulse quickened as I tried to process what I was looking at. He wasn't splashing, wasn't moving. He was just lying there like a piece of driftwood, and my first, gut-wrenching thought was that he was dead, some poor guy who had drowned in the lake during the night and had only now been discovered. The horror of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I scanned the area for any signs of life, any other people, boats, divers, something, but the place was deserted. Not even a stray jogger or fisherman in sight. It was just me, the fog, and this man who looked like he had drifted up from the depths of some underwater graveyard. Panic surged through me. There was no time to overthink this. I had to do something, and I had to do it now. My instincts took over, and before I knew it, I was frantically kicking off my sneakers and ripping off my leggings, stripping down to my bra and panties without even thinking twice. I bolted toward the water, the jagged rocks digging into my bare feet with every step. In my head, I was picturing some heroic scene, a slow motion leap into the water, gracefully cutting through the surface like an Olympic swimmer. But in reality, I was in for a rude awakening. My feet hit the slippery stones at the edge, and instead of a graceful dive, I launched myself into the lake with all the elegance of a sack of potatoes, landing with a loud, painful belly flop that sent water splashing in every direction. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and the icy coldness of the lake gripped me like a vice, making my limbs seize up for a moment. I surfaced, gasping for air, and immediately started swimming toward him, half blind because my contacts were stinging like hell. With each stroke, my anxiety ratcheted up another notch. The water felt like it was pressing in from all sides, colder and darker with every inch I covered. I had never felt the lake to be so infinite before, but right then, it seemed to stretch down endlessly below me, as if the bottom could reach up and swallow me whole at any second. As I drew closer to him, my thoughts grew more frantic. What if I was too late? What if I reached out to grab him, and he was as cold and lifeless as the water itself? What if he had been down there for hours, and I was about to come face to face with something I'd never be able to unsee? I was close enough now to touch him. Bracing myself, I extended a hand, expecting to feel the clammy flesh of a corpse, but the moment my fingers brushed his skin, I was met with a different kind of shock. His eyes snapped open, and he stared directly at me with this piercing intensity that almost made me forget how to swim. He wasn't just alive, he was alert, and the look on his face was one of genuine surprise, like he hadn't expected to see anyone else out there. He calmly took out his diving regulator, his breathing steady and controlled, and asked, "You okay?" For a second, I was sure I was hallucinating. My brain couldn't reconcile what I was seeing with the situation I had imagined in my head. I had come out here to rescue a drowning man, not to find myself awkwardly treading water in my underwear while being questioned by the supposedly dead guy. I thought you needed saving, I stammered, my cheeks heating up despite the freezing cold of the water. The mortification crept in like a slow burn, spreading from my face down to the tips of my toes. Before I could come up with an excuse or even make a run for it, I heard a low chuckle. I glanced behind me and nearly jumped out of my skin as another head broke the surface about 30 feet away, followed by another, and then another. Soon, there were at least half a dozen men emerging from the depths like some kind of aquatic army, all of them grinning at me with the kind of bemused expressions that told me I had just swum, into the middle of something very serious and very, very not meant for me. It took a moment, but then it clicked. I had just gate-crashed a military training exercise. These were not casual divers out for a morning swim. These were soldiers, trainees, or whatever the hell you call people who willingly submerge themselves in near-freezing water before sunrise for fun. The original victim, who I had so valiantly attempted to save, wasn't struggling for his life. He was probably thinking about his breakfast or some underwater drill, while I was floundering around like a flailing idiot. My cheeks burned with embarrassment as I realized that I had not only interrupted their exercise, but had done so in the most ungraceful and unnecessary way possible. The man I had initially tried to rescue swam over to me, his smile widening as he got closer. "Need a tow back to shore?" he asked, his tone dripping with playful sarcasm. There was no way I was going to accept help now, not after the spectacle I'd just made of myself. I forced a smile, though it felt more like a grimace, and said, "No, thanks. I've got it." The shore was now a good distance away, much farther than I had initially realized, and with every stroke, the water seemed to get heavier and heavier. My muscles ached, and I was regretting all the late nights I had spent binge-watching Netflix instead of working out. Eventually, I made it back to the rocky shore, dragging myself out of the water with as much dignity as I could muster. I was shivering uncontrollably, my clothes soaked, and I could feel my hair sticking to my face in wet clumps. The guy who had needed saving was already climbing out of the lake with the ease of someone who's used to conquering physical challenges. I tried to stand tall, throwing my shoulders back as if I hadn't just embarrassed myself in front of what I could only assume were some of the most hardcore men in the city. "You're lucky I wasn't actually dying," he said with a chuckle as he approached. "I think dragging me to shore would have been quite the workout." His voice had that teasing quality, but there was a warmth behind it that made me feel less like a complete fool. He was tall, muscular, and had this rugged handsome look, like the kind of guy you'd see in a military recruitment poster. His dark hair was wet and tousled, clinging to his forehead in a way that only made him look more like a hero emerging from the depths. There was an air of effortless confidence about him, the kind that comes from years of pushing your body and mind to their limits. I could feel my cheeks flush again, not just from embarrassment this time, but from the sudden awareness that I was standing there, shivering in my soaking wet bra and panties, in front of what looked like a real-life action hero. He introduced himself as Jake, because of course his name would be something ruggedly all-American like that. He explained that he and the other guys were cadets from a nearby military academy, out here for a pre-dive training program. The drill they'd been conducting was part of their preparation for dive school, a grueling program that would eventually turn them into elite combat divers. Apparently, they'd been submerged and navigating the lake in complete darkness for hours, using only underwater navigation tools and signals. When I'd burst onto the scene, I'd blown their whole stealth approach operation wide open. I tried to laugh it off, saying, "Well, at least I gave you guys some extra training on how to deal with a clueless civilian intruder." Jake chuckled, that playful glint never leaving his eye. "Yeah, we don't usually train for that kind of situation, but I guess it's good to be prepared for anything," he said with a wink. The other cadets were climbing out of the water now, their expressions ranging from amused to downright entertained by the morning's unexpected twist. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks again as I realized that I had become the joke of their training session. As if on cue, one of the other cadets called out, "Hey, Jake, looks like you found yourself a personal lifeguard." The others laughed, and I felt a mix of irritation and embarrassment bubbling up inside me. But then Jake turned back to me, still smiling, and said, "You know, we were planning on grabbing breakfast after this. You're welcome to join us, seeing as you're already dressed for a swim and all." I hesitated, not because I wasn't interested in getting to know this charming, sarcastic military trainee better, but because I still had to jog back to where I'd left my clothes by the trail. I should probably go get dressed first," I replied, glancing back toward the wooded path. "I don't think the diner has a swimwear dress code." Jake laughed, the sound deep and genuine. And I found myself smiling despite the awkwardness of the whole situation. "Fair enough," he said. "I'll meet you back here. If you decide you don't want to be seen with us after all, I won't hold it against you." I nodded, feeling a weird mix of relief and excitement as I jogged up the path to where I'd ditched my clothes. The morning fog was starting to lift, and the sunlight was beginning to filter through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. As I pulled on my leggings and shoes, I couldn't stop replaying the entire incident in my head, the belly flop, the look on Jake's face when he realized I was trying to save him, the laughter of the other cadets. It was like a scene out of a movie, except I was the clumsy comic relief instead of the daring heroine. When I made it back to the meeting spot, Jake was waiting for me, now wearing a dry hoodie and jogging pants, looking every bit as put together as he had in the water. "You came back," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Well, I couldn't just leave you guys hanging after that epic performance," I replied, trying to play it cool. The other cadets were gathered around a couple of vehicles, joking and ribbing each other about the morning's events, but when they saw me approaching, they all turned with expectant grins. "Looks like we've got a new recruit," one of them teased, and I rolled my eyes, but couldn't help smiling. Jake gestured for me to join them as they climbed into a couple of military-style trucks. "We're heading to this diner not far from here," he explained. "The food's great, and they have the best coffee around. It'll help warm you up after your morning swim." I climbed into the truck next to him, trying not to let my nerves get the best of me. Part of me still couldn't believe I was about to go have breakfast with a bunch of military cadets, especially after I'd just made a complete fool of myself. The diner was a cozy little place, the kind that looks like it hasn't changed in decades, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner playing soft rock hits from the 80s. The warm air hit me like a comforting embrace the moment we walked in, and I could feel my shivering finally start to subside. Jake and I slid into one of the booths, while the other cadets took the one next to us, still laughing and talking about the drill and how I'd become the unexpected star of the morning. "So, what made you think I was dead?" Jake asked as he stirred sugar into his coffee. His tone was casual, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. "Honestly, you were just floating there, totally still," I replied. "It was creepy. Like, haunting creepy. I thought I'd stumbled across a body." I could hear the embarrassment creeping into my voice again as I relived the moment in my mind. And there was no one else around, so I just panicked. Jake nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. I guess I can see how it might have looked that way. We were practicing stealth approaches, trying to stay hidden as long as possible. You definitely blew our cover. He grinned at me, and I found myself relaxing a little. Well, glad to know I'm an expert at ruining military operations, I said with a laugh, shaking my head at the absurdity of it all. As the conversation flowed, I learned more about what he and the other cadets were training for. They were part of an elite program at a military academy, prepping for dive school, which was apparently no joke. The training they'd been doing involved long hours in the water, grueling physical endurance tests, and survival skills that went far beyond anything I could imagine. The more he talked, the more fascinated I became, not just with the training itself, but with Jake and the quiet determination he seemed to carry with him. He spoke with a mix of seriousness and humor, and there was this self-assuredness about him that was incredibly magnetic. Somehow, in between talking about dive school and military drills, we ended up discussing everything from movies and music to the weirdest foods we'd ever tried. The other cadets occasionally chimed in with their own stories, making the whole breakfast feel like I'd suddenly become part of this tight-knit group, despite the fact that I'd only met them because of a massive misunderstanding. At some point, one of them started teasing Jake about his rescuer, and I found myself blushing again as he shrugged it off with a laugh. When breakfast was over and we were walking back out to the parking lot, Jake turned to me with that same crooked smile that I'd seen back at the lake. "You know," he said, "I think you might have actually saved me from dying of boredom during that drill. It's not every day we get an interruption quite like that." There was something in his tone, maybe a hint of flirtation or just a genuine warmth, that made my stomach flutter. I laughed and shrugged. "Glad to be of service," I replied. "But next time, let's try for a slightly less dramatic introduction." He grinned and nodded. "Deal. I'll keep it in mind." There was a brief, almost awkward silence as we stood there, not quite ready to say goodbye. "Listen," Jake said, scratching the back of his neck in that way people do when they're slightly nervous. "A few of us are planning to grab a drink later at the bar, you know, your bar. You should come. Or, I guess, you'll probably be working anyway." "I'll be there," I said, a bit too quickly, but then added, "Working, that is. But yeah, come by. I could use some non-customer company for once." He flashed me one last smile, then hopped into one of the trucks with the other cadets, who were already ribbing him about his new rescuer friend. I watched as they drove off, feeling a strange mix of relief and anticipation swirling inside me. The morning had started as one of the most embarrassing experiences of my life, but somehow, I'd managed to turn it into a story worth telling. Edit, back at work now, and I can confirm that my sister's boyfriend has already spread the word to every single staff member about my heroic attempt at rescuing a military trainee. They're having way too much fun reenacting the whole incident in slow motion, complete with fake drowning noises and overdramatic gestures. To make matters worse, the Reddit post I wrote about this whole debacle has apparently gone viral, and people have been stopping by the bar asking if I'm the girl from the lake. Fantastic. I didn't exactly sign up to become a local celebrity, but I guess it's too late to back out now. Edit 2, it's getting late, and the bar is packed. Still no sign.